Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be running through 7 players that a lot of us are thinking about buying this week, but I'm here to decipher whether or not they're going to make good purchases or not ahead of game week 16 and beyond. So before we get started, as always, if you do enjoy the content from today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming to get to 2,500 subscribers before Christmas, so if you could assist with that, that would be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, let's talk about Jarrod Bowen, who obviously is going to be a hot topic of conversation ahead of game week 16 after what he did in game week 15 over the weekend with a goal, assist, 3 bonus points, and maybe a bit of a reminder what sort of player he can be. He does typically enter the fray into our minds at different periods of the FPL season, but so far this year hasn't really been discussed that much, and that is reflected in the ownership right now as well at just 6.8%. That's very differential for a player of his sort of ability, and it really goes to show just how much West Ham have been struggling so far this season, that Jarrod Bowen hasn't really been a major factor for us. But despite all of that, he still racked up 9 attacking returns, including 4 goals, 5 assists, which honestly is not bad going whatsoever at this stage in the season. That's about 2 attacking returns for every 3 game weeks, which is, for someone of his price point, under 7.5 million, very good value for money. The data's also not bad either, although it is worth noting that he is overperforming so far, but we do come to expect that from him over the last couple of seasons. He does seem to be quite prolific and quite able to overperform on the underlying data. So just as an example so far this season, 0.47 XGI per 90, not bad by any means, but if we translate that across the season so far, he's been expected to get 6.86 attacking returns. So he is quite significantly overperforming so far. But if he continues even returning at the rate that we'd expect based on that data, he's still going to be a pretty decent asset at that price point. He's playing more centrally now due to injuries within the West Ham squad. And again, because we know what he can do from seasons past, there is a fair amount of security and safety going with someone like Jarrod Bowen. We know the minutes are going to be good. We know that the attacking data is historically pretty good, so we don't think that's going to disappear all of a sudden. And with the next 3 fixtures round the corner, Bournemouth, Brighton, Southampton, especially that Southampton game, there are potentially more points on the horizon for him. Now, a big question is being asked at the moment whether or not you can invest in West Ham assets, just because they as a team haven't looked too sharp this season. But you have to almost separate the team from the player in FPL decisions. And Bowen, despite all of West Ham's struggles, has been performing really well. 9 attacking returns, like I said, in what has been a struggling side. Just imagine what could happen if West Ham do turn the corner and become a little bit better in the next few game weeks. If they are able to turn that corner, then Bowen could make himself an even better FPL asset than we've seen so far. And even if they don't, he's still ticking along nicely anyway. So if you've got a space in your midfield for a fairly short-term asset, because as you can see, the fixtures do turn in game week 19 a little bit less positive, then you could find yourself a nice differential for the next 3 game weeks, whilst a lot of managers quite simply just aren't going to go there because they will overlook him because he plays for West Ham, because the data is not amazing, and because the fixtures do run out in just a few game weeks. So, of course, another player who has been taking all the headlines, really, over the last few game weeks has been Enzo Fernandez, and rightly so, by the way. He's been absolutely incredible, objectively, even from an eye test point of view. He has really stepped it up a few levels over the last few game weeks. In fact, from an attacking point of view, he's returned in each of his 5 last Premier League games, which, again, for what is normally a fairly defensive or at least box-to-box midfielder, pretty significant overperformance, and not something we normally expect from a player of his play style, let's say. I was about to say caliber, but that would be giving him a disservice because he is obviously very talented. We just wouldn't necessarily be expecting the attacking returns from him as regularly as he has been producing. So the key question I want to ask right now is, what might have changed in the last few game weeks that might suggest that this isn't just a very hot streak where he's overperforming significantly and it's going to die back down, but what could we see on the eye that suggests that this continues? And the first important thing that I want to note is he is playing in a much more advanced role over the last 4 or 5 game weeks. He is playing almost alongside Palmer, And I wouldn't quite call it a number 10 role, but it's certainly something more like a number 8 role, which, again, you wouldn't really suggest that he is normally playing in. He's usually a bit deeper in a number 6, number 4 kind of role in a defensive midfield shape. But since he's been released a little bit, given license to move forward alongside Palmer at times, he is finding spaces in and around the box, hovering around the edge for the cutback as well. And Enzo Fernandez recently has been getting into many more goal-scoring positions than we might have previously expected him to. So, will this continue? Well, given the fact that Chelsea have been playing really well recently, in very good form as a team, then I would be pretty surprised if Maresca changed anything systematically within the side over this next stretch. And as you can see, with the next 5 game weeks in mind, in fact, it goes a little bit further than that, by the way, as well, they are some pretty good games to be hopping onto Chelsea attackers for. So if you think that this stays the same, if you think that Enzo continues to play in this role alongside Palmer or very close to alongside Palmer, then yes, he is overperforming, but the attacking returns might still continue at a relatively decent cadence. And it is worth noting that this is overperformance. No matter how you cut this up and look at it, he is the 4th most informed midfielder in the game at the moment, behind the 3 premiums being Salah, Palmer and Saka. So for someone at 5 million, yes, this is overperformance, and no, it's not going to continue at quite this rate throughout the rest of the season. Or if it does, then it's highly, highly unexpected for him doing so. However, at 5 million, you're not really expecting it to. You're expecting, at the very best, to get a goal or an assist every other game. And even if you get that, you'd still probably consider yourself getting very good value for money. He is going to be an 8th attacker, not someone that you rely on every single week. But with these fixtures, you can bring him in any given game week. And I think the key question I will be asking myself over the next couple of game weeks is, can I rely on him to be a starter in all of these games? Because if I can, and I think he's been that good recently that he will lock down that starting role no matter what, then he is going to be a pretty decent pickup in the midfield. The problem is that Chelsea have a very deep squad. They have basically 2 first 11s that they can play, and players like Nkunku, João Felix as well can drift into the role that Enzo is playing at the moment and could easily displace him in any given game week just purely down to rotation. So I am still a little bit cautious. The upside is there, and at this price point, it is very tempting to go there immediately and take the gamble on minutes continuing. I wouldn't necessarily say he gets dropped at any point soon, but he could get rotated, or if there are injuries in defensive midfield, he could get placed back in a more withdrawn role. Let's say Caicedo gets injured or Lavia comes out the side, then Fernandez could withdraw a little bit at times, and we might not see the same sort of advanced role that he has been playing in the recent weeks. Overall, I'm a little bit on the fence with this one. I think there is opportunity there, but I would still be maybe a touch cautious that this is overperformance and we might not necessarily expect him to continue in this role forever. For the time being though, the sun is shining and he is getting good points, so I wouldn't put anyone off of going there, but just be aware that if you're playing him as maybe one of your first 4 midfielders, not your 5th, then that is maybe a slightly more risky play, and at some point over the next few game weeks, you might need to consider making a move to bolster your midfield elsewhere. Now, a lot of us are scratching our heads at the moment when it comes to defenders and any sort of transfers that can be made in the defence, because a lot of them are very frustrating to hold on to at the moment. But there are a couple of cheap defenders and 1 or 2 more expensive ones that I will be talking about today that I might advise you to be looking at as alternatives to some of the players that we've already got and, let's face it, are stinking up our teams right now. One of them is Milos Kerkez, who has been going under the radar a little bit so far this season, but managers are starting to pick up on the fact that Bournemouth's underlying defensive data isn't all that bad now. 1.24 XGC per 90 in the minutes that Kerkez has played for Bournemouth so far this season. And it is also worth noting that Kerkez has been pretty much playing every single minute so far for Bournemouth. So if you're looking for someone in that defence, considering the data's not too bad, and has a bit of underlying attacking data on his side as well, Kirkes could be the man, especially considering the minutes he has been getting. I don't think we're really going to find ourselves a much better deal in the Bournemouth defence right now than someone producing, okay, not amazing defensive data, but locked in at that price point, 4.6 million, and is going forward, is moving forwards a little bit in the attacking phases. I do quite like Kirkes at under 5% owned. There aren't really many other differential defenders out there at under 5 million right now that I would recommend buying, but Kirkes is definitely amongst the batch of the more promising defenders right now, with the defensive and attacking data combined, alongside the fact the fixtures over the next 5 are also looking pretty positive, especially those home games where, again, Bournemouth are slightly better at home, slightly tighter at home as well, have already pulled off a number of pretty big victories down at the Vitality Stadium. So West Ham, Crystal Palace, Everton in 3 of the next 5, all at home. I'd back them for clean sheets in 1 or 2 of them at least. And if Kirkes can bag himself any sort of attacking return in those games, you could have yourself a bit of a bargain on your hands. So he is a player that I'm looking at potentially as maybe a Rico Lewis replacement over the next couple of game weeks. With these fixtures, with decent enough underlying attacking data, I don't think you're going to find too much better out there at this sort of price point. So, of course, we have to talk about Alexander Isak, who's been in red-hot form recently. And honestly, I am absolutely kicking myself that I got rid of him a couple of game weeks ago when he had that injury doubt. I'm really, really annoyed with myself for getting rid of such a good asset. But this is your warning. You can still get to him if you want to ahead of what is a very good fixture run. And actually, on paper over the next 5, I don't think this quite does it justice, because the next 5 is a decent stretch. Obviously, the next 2 very, very positive. But after game week 20, Newcastle run into an absolutely phenomenal run of fixtures as well. So it goes far beyond the next 5 game weeks. And if you can get through 18, 19 and 20, and honestly, even though on paper they don't look necessarily the best fixtures, yellows and reds on the ticker, you back him to do pretty well in all of those games, and none of those 3 defences are particularly sharp right now. Villa, Man United, Tottenham. Isak could easily tear any of those 3 apart. And with Isak in particular, with a lot of strikers in fact this year, but especially those who are slightly more talismanic for their sides, on penalties as well always helps. But these kind of players, even if they score 1 goal, even in a defeat like we saw Newcastle over the weekend against Brentford, he can come away with pretty significant bonus points. So a 4-2 defeat against Brentford, Isak only got 1 return, came away with 2 bonus points as well, which just goes to show how effective getting a goal can be for your strikers this season. So if you can find one who is pretty consistent in front of goal, on penalties, of course, as I said, always helps with that. Alexander Isak being the prime example of this right now. All you really need to bank on is a goal a game or a goal every other game, and you're also picking up the bonus points alongside it, and you're looking at 8-9 pointers for even just 1 return in any given game week. With the fixtures to come for Alexander Isak, the sort of underlying data he's putting up right now as well, and injury doubts, hopefully a little bit of a thing of the past for him, at 8.6 million, he's fantastic value for money, and I honestly really am kicking myself for getting rid of him a couple of game weeks ago, and I'm trying to find a route back to him without needing to take a hit to do so. Now, over the last few game weeks, I would say that FPL has become maybe a little bit more template recently, especially with the 3 premium midfielders, that being Saka, Salah, and Palmer, all performing really well and with good fixtures to come. So a lot of us have what seems like fairly template sides right now, and it can be at times quite difficult to stand out from the crowd and make serious gains on your opponents because we all have quite similar squads. But one opportunity that I really like the look of over the next few game weeks to be a bit more differential, to maybe create a bit more of a compound differential rather than necessarily just him in his own right, would be Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is admittedly at 21.2% ownership right now. But I would care to wager in the higher tiers, in the higher ranks, Trent's ownership is more likely to be around 5 or 10% right now, and a lot of that ownership will be ghost teams that set up at the start of the season, forgot to make transfers, and Trent kind of just stayed there through the injuries he's had and through the changing fixtures that Liverpool has had as well. So I would say that even in the top couple of million, Trent is going to be a pretty decent differential over the next few game weeks. And the reason I'm recommending him so highly to stand out from the crowd right now is because not a lot of managers are going to easily be able to get there because they've spent a lot of their money in the midfield. If you can get there with the data he's putting up, 0.38 XGI per 90 is absolutely phenomenal. That's up amongst the best sort of data that we've seen Trent produce over the last few seasons. But the added benefit this year is that Liverpool are playing with a lot more control and their defensive data is a lot better than what we saw over the last few seasons under Klopp. So with Trent in the side, Liverpool are conceding 0.79 XG per 90, which is very, very good underlying defensive data, by the way. That's some of the best we've seen in the last few seasons. Only really Arsenal and Man City have put up that sort of data over the last few seasons at all. And if Liverpool can keep that up, I would expect a clean sheet in pretty much every other game week. So if in 1 in every 2 game weeks, Liverpool are keeping clean sheets, especially looking at this run coming, you'd say there are 3 decent home games for clean sheets there. West Ham away isn't bad either. If you can bank on the fact that Liverpool keep a few clean sheets in that run, and Trent can put up an attacking return in, let's say, a third of all games because he's running at just over 0.33 XGI per 90, that is, in total, a very good FPL asset waiting for you as a differential, and one that, if he can produce both of those things, a clean sheet and an attacking return in 1 game week, you're very likely looking at pretty decent bonus points as well as the fact that you get all of the appearance points chucked in. You're probably looking at a double-digit haul in any one of those game weeks. Trent at the moment is the best defender in the game to be picking up, in my opinion. It's all just down to the price, and if you can afford it as a bit of a differential in the maybe the higher couple million ranks, I would say that he's going to be a very interesting asset over the next few, and I'm really keen on trying to restructure my side a little bit, maybe taking a little bit out of my forward line and boosting my defence, where, let's face it, not many clean sheets around at the moment, not many attacking returns either. Trent is a player that I bank on to get both of those things over the next few game weeks, and for that little bit extra, I think it might be worth the money to just pile the money towards Trent rather than play around too much with 3 or 4.5 million assets. So I've spoken a little bit about how good the Arsenal defence has been this season, even though they've been maybe a little bit frustrating in terms of the actual output, and that being the clean sheets so far. But the fixtures to come are still looking really promising. So a lot of us will be trying to find ways into the Arsenal defence, and it's been really frustrating recently with Gabriel owners in mind in particular, that he has been out injured, because the clean sheets have kind of been on the cards, and also attacking returns from set pieces in particular. But for all of those Gabriel owners like myself who have been frustrated, people who've been flocking towards Saliba or Timber, who I'll be talking about in this section, have been rewarded in the last few game weeks. Now, Timber is a player that I'm perhaps particularly interested in because of his price point. At 5.6 million, it's a pretty nice way into the Arsenal defence without having to spend that little bit extra for the likes of Saliba, who normally doesn't put up too much attacking data either. Gabriel tends to be the main man from set pieces. Obviously, he's been out, so those set pieces have been redirected somewhat towards Saliba, maybe to some extent Timber as well. But normally, I wouldn't really expect that to be Saliba's job in and around the box, and more Gabriel's when he does come back, and hopefully that is soon. However, if you don't have either of those players at the moment, and you are looking for an Arsenal defender, Timber could be the guy. At 5.6 million, you save a little bit of money. It's a pretty easy route into the defence for them. And ever since game week 9, he's been a very consistent starter for them. Obviously helped by the fact that Ben White, who is a competitor for his place, has been injured and we suspect will be injured for a little while to come yet. But Timber has been pretty consistently in their starting 11 all the way through the season, even despite Ben White being fit at times as well. And over the last 6 or 7 game weeks has been a very consistent member of their best starting 11. The data from an attacking point of view, it's not all that bad, and he's been making some really good moves up the right channel alongside Saka, alongside Ødegaard, and they've all created themselves a pretty nice little partnership in that third of the pitch over the right-hand side. And given the way he's performing alongside those two, I would be pretty surprised if he came out the side anytime soon. As you can see as well, the next 3 fixtures in particular are looking pretty good from a defensive point of view, and you would think that there's a decent chance in any one of those games to get a clean sheet. The defensive numbers that Arsenal have been putting up recently as well have actually been absolutely phenomenal, and they've been slightly unfortunate not to keep more clean sheets than they have done in the last 3 game weeks in particular, given the data they've been putting up. So if you want, I wouldn't say a locked move into the Arsenal defence, but a pretty confident bet that you could be placing in the Arsenal defence right now would be that Timber keeps his place for a pretty decent amount of time yet to come, given the other injuries. And I do think there is a little bit of attacking upside there as well. Now, before I wrap up this section, it is worth noting very quickly that I wouldn't flock to him just yet because he wasn't spotted in Arsenal training in the midweek, and that is as of Tuesday evening ahead of their Champions League tie. So do keep an eye out. If he is an injured out, then fair enough, then maybe hold fire for now. But if we see him in training before the end of the week and before game week 16, I think he's a really solid bet into the Arsenal defensive line. So I did tell you I'd be recommending a couple of the cheaper defenders in this video. One, of course, was Milos Kerkez. The second one I want to recommend to you is Daniel Munos, who himself is another really decent pickup as a differential over the next few game weeks. Now, the annoying thing I would say in comparison to Kerkez is the fixtures aren't really there for Crystal Palace at the moment, so it is a tougher position to be bringing him in right now if you're looking at a fixtures play. But Munos himself has been absolutely phenomenal recently, especially. But those of you who were looking at him last season as well, since he came in, I think it was in the January transfer window, he has been a very advanced and crucial member to the way Crystal Palace set up in attacking phases, and Munos himself has put up very good underlying attacking data, especially from a goal point of view when it comes to defenders. So 0.19 xG per 90 for a defender is almost unheard of. That is absolutely unbelievable data. I'm pretty sure he's up there with the top 2 or 3 defensive assets in the game when it comes to XG data so far this season. He's an absolute lock down that right-hand side for Crystal Palace. And now it looks like they're starting to get their act together a little bit. Munos is also not only returning the attacking data, but actually picking up the returns as well. So 2 goals in his last 3 game weeks, a clean sheet in there as well. I think that we're starting to see a resurgence for Crystal Palace, but also Munos as a part of that system looks incredibly advanced, if not even more so than last season. And as frustrating as he was at the back end of last season, not really delivering on this sort of data that he produces, it is starting to come through for him. And as a differential, 4.7 million, you're looking at the likes of Rico Lewis, you're looking at Chelsea defenders, maybe Colwill, Brighton defenders like Dunk or Van Hecke. None of those players are putting up the underlying attacking data that Daniel Munos is, especially from an XG point of view. And if you back Crystal Palace to get back to anywhere near the quality they were showing at the back end of last season, I really like him as a bit of a differential. There are a couple of game weeks you might want to look at making sure that he is sat on your bench, but Arsenal, especially in game week 17, if you can bench him for that game week, outside of that, it's not really looking that bad. Brighton, Bournemouth, Southampton in the next 4. Chelsea in game week 20 isn't the best, but if you're looking at him from an attacking point of view, you're not really that scared of Chelsea defensively. So I quite like him as a differential at 4.7 million. I think the price really does make him quite tempting. I think he's more of a 5 million asset that has been downgraded a little bit over the last few weeks because Crystal Palace haven't been in the best of form. But if you can pick him up now at a little bit of a cut price 4.7, I think you've got yourself a pretty decent upside for a differential there. So then, as we wrap up today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. As I mentioned, I'm aiming for 2,500 subscribers by Christmas or by New Year. That would be absolutely fantastic. And not going to lie, it's going to be difficult to do so. So if you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that button. But also, if you have any questions at all that I haven't answered in today's video, or players that I haven't recommended that you'd like me to just have a chat about in the comments, do feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll try and get back to you before game week 16 kicks off. In the meantime, good luck preparing your sides ahead of game week 16, and I'll see you later this week as I look through my team selection ahead of the deadline.